And 3, 2, and 1.
Buongiorno and benvenuti. I'm Pat Tinto, Connecticut Region President for the National Organization of Italian American Women. Today, I'm excited to welcome you to our special virtual panel we like to call Italian American Women Who Rule the World, a conversation about women in politics with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Connecticut Democratic Party Chair Nancy DiNardo, and the Campaign School at Yale's Executive Director, Patricia Russo. Together, we will examine the power of civically engaged women and the importance of passing on the torch to young Italian-American women so that they are involved, informed, inspired, and heard. A special thank you to the staff at NOIAW, Eileen Condon and Angelica Laferno for helping us with the tech part of the program. A little bit of background on NOIAW. NOIAW was founded 40 years ago by a group of Italian-American women who sought to create a national network to support the educational and professional aspirations of its members and to combat ethnic stereotypes by promoting positive role models. Some of the early members and founders include the late Geraldine Ferraro, former vice presidential candidate, Matilda Cuomo, former First Lady of New York, and our founder and co-chair and chair emerita, Dr. Aileen Riotto-Sierri. In fact, this program is the third in a series of 4 for 40, honoring our 40th anniversary. Please check our websites for other ways you can support NOIAW and our programs, including what we hope will be our in-person gala on May 1st. But an essential part of NOIAW's mission is to celebrate the achievements of Italian-American women. We do this through inspiring and empowering women of Italian-American ancestry and by promoting their professional achievements in the workplace and community. I'm proud to be in the company of these 3 fabulous Connecticut Italian-American women whose daily lives revolve around empowering women in the world of public service, education, and advocacy. We're here to celebrate Italian-American Heritage Month and delve a bit into what gains have been made in women's economic security and participation in the political process, and what work remains to be done. I chose the topic of public service and the need to increase the presence of women at all levels of government because here in Connecticut, we are fortunate to have had the late and beloved Governor Ella Rosa, the daughter of Italian immigrants, as a role model and a pioneer who led the way for all of us as the nation's first woman to be elected governor in her own right. Before we start our conversation, I want to tell you briefly about our distinguished panel. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro represents New Haven, the city with the highest percentage of Italian Americans, making up 21.2% of its population. She serves in Democratic leadership as co-chair of the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, and she's the chair of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Appropriations Subcommittee, where she oversees our nation's investments in education, health, and employment. Rosa also serves as a senior Democrat on the subcommittee responsible for the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, where she oversees food and drug safety, and on the House Budget Committee. Soon after earning degrees from Marymount College and Columbia University, Rosa followed her parents' footsteps into public service, serving as the first director of Emily's List, a national organization dedicated to increasing the number of women in elected office. She was also executive director of Countdown 87, a national campaign that successfully stopped U.S. military aid to Nicaraguan Contras, and as chief of staff to United States Senator Christopher Dodd. In 1990, Rosa was elected to the House of Representatives, and she has served as the Congresswoman from Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District ever since. Nancy DiNardo is the first woman to serve as the state's Democratic chair and has a long history of service and success at the local, state, and federal levels. She started her political career in 1971 when she was elected to the Trumbull Democratic Town Committee. She has served on the Democratic State Central Committee and served as finance chair and has worked for Trumbull's Board of Health, Finance, and Police Commission. She is also currently one of 2 Democratic National Committee members from Connecticut and serves on the board of directors of Griffin Hospital and the Connecticut Port Authority. Nancy worked for 30 years as an educator in the Bridgeport school system, working her way from a teacher to the director of psychological services. Patricia Russo is a nationally recognized leader focused on improving the quality of life for women in Connecticut and the United States. For over 25 years, she has held numerous leadership positions in public, private, and not-for-profit organizations centered on women's leadership. She has also held leadership positions on federal, state, and local political campaigns. Currently, Patricia serves as the executive director of the Campaign School at Yale, a nonpartisan, issue-neutral political campaign training program for women interested in running for public office, as well as for women interested in campaign management. Based at Yale Law School, it is a leading program attracting women from the United States and internationally. So let's begin the conversation with our honored guests, who are all past recipients of NOIAW Wise Woman Award. I'm going to turn the program over to Patricia Russo, who will keep the conversation flowing as if we are all together across that Sunday dinner table. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many as possible before time runs out. And now I'll turn it over to Patty. Salute, and I'm going to let myself disappear now. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Pat. It's thrilling to be here with all of you. I wish we were together again. That's an Italian thing, right? For sure. I'm grateful for the Zoom technology, but there is nothing better than being around the table, especially with these three. I hope, I've said this a lot during many, many Zoom presentations since March, that there is nothing better in the world than working with amazing Italian American women who happen to be your best friends, okay? So when Pat picks up the phone and says, hey, I wanna do this in the middle of a crazy campaign, of course, we're there, right? She calls Rosa, yeah, sure, Nancy, sure. That's kind of the beauty and the wonder of our culture and, who we are as women. And as my mom always said to my daughter, tucked her in for 30 years, every night she'd say, honey, not everybody's lucky enough to be Italian. And she's taken that to heart. My poor WASP husband, she doesn't even know what else she is. All she knows is she's Italian. So I'm just thrilled to be here because we are a special people. We really are. And we lead our lives differently. We really understand service, that's for sure. And that's why I'm so happy to be here with Rosa and Nancy to talk about, just, share their family perspectives and how they came to be who they are. Pat, you mentioned Ella Grasso. That was the first campaign I worked on, was her re-elect campaign when I arrived in Connecticut in 1978 as a Jersey refugee. And Rosa, my first real campaign job was for Rosa on Chris Dodd's Senate race, right? So we go way back. And I just follow Nancy DiNardo around because I learn something new from her every day. So let's dive in a little bit and let's, Rosa, I knew your mom. I loved your mom. She was one of my girlfriends. So just the two of you could share a little bit about your background and how that helped shape you to be the amazing Italian leaders that you are.
Want me to start? I'll start.
You can start.
Okay, thank you. Listen, yes. First of all, this is great. We usually have this great gathering with NOIAW, at the Lawn Club with a great breakfast and dinner and the awards. But I'm so delighted that, this is what you're doing this year and getting us all together, even though obviously we all want to be in the same place and we can't. But it's 40 years, and I can just say what we say in Italian is cent'anni. So we're going to continue to move on. I think when I think about Nancy and Patty, look, we've traveled the same road. When I'm asked by the press, and I am, what motivates you, Congresswoman DeLauro? Why do you vote the way you do? Why do you take up the issues that you do, what is it you care about, etc. There's a very simple answer. It's not obviously the opportunity that I've had to serve in the House of Representatives for a number of years, but for me, it is about growing up in an Italian Catholic household. That is the place where we're able to form who we are and what we are about. It's about our values, faith, work, family, responsibility, all of those things that were ingrained in us. I am, and both Nancy and Patty have heard me say this so many times that it's probably ad nauseum, but it's true. I'm the daughter of an immigrant family. They could only dream that I would sit in the United States House of Representatives. My dad couldn't read or write the English language. He left school in the 7th grade. So his whole focus, which is the case in our culture, is that education, and that is a way for you to succeed. My dad fought for immigrant rights, getting the Italian language taught in the public schools. My mom worked in the old sweatshops in the city of New Haven. Both were committed to government, and let me make the connection, and I want to have Nancy speak about her her background. But my mom, as I say, she started working in the old sweatshops of piecework. She went on to serve on the city council in New Haven, the Board of Alders, and she was there for 35 years, the longest serving member, not the longest serving woman of the New Haven Board of Alders. And the way I characterize my folks' brand of politics, they didn't write a healthcare bill. They didn't write omnibus legislation. What they did was they made government work for the people of our community, create opportunity for them. And that's what their brand of politics, which is about, which they were about. And they worked tirelessly for people with need. If you needed a job, if your kid got in trouble, you know, my folks were there to help them out, you know, and so, and that's for me. And why do I love what I do? Why do I feel blessed with what I do? Because what they taught me was that the government can expand opportunity and move us to greater equality. It ensures that life, the health, and the dignity of families, and that it can be there, yes, in good times, but particularly in times of difficulty to help families in trouble. And we have a moral obligation, and a shared responsibility for others. It's not himself, herself, or, you know, it's just not about us. It is about the people that we serve, and the most vulnerable. So that's what I've tried to focus on in my career in the House of Representatives. And again, I am blessed to have the opportunity to serve in this position, because government has an unbelievable impact on people's lives, as it should. So let me leave it there. Thank you, Patty.
Okay, so it's my turn. And I can almost say ditto to a lot of what Rosa has said, except that it was my grandparents, all four of them, who were immigrants. And Patty Russo, a couple of them, I never thought about it until you talked, actually came up to Bridgeport from New Jersey. So we'll have to talk sometime to see, yeah, where it was in New Jersey. That it was my mother's father and my father's mother, who were both in New Jersey. So, but what I found, and I'm sure so many of you have, and coming from an Italian household, it wasn't, you know, being Italian, it's where in Italy was your family from? And even to this day, when I talk to people, I ask that, and they don't blink about it. Other people look at me kind of strangely, but anyone who's, you know, Italian knows it. You always ask, you know, which area they are from. And both of my parents, but primarily my father, were involved in politics. And we used to have fundraisers at the house for the first selectmen that were here. And I always remember growing up, one of our first selectmen, first time I met him, he had come to our house. He actually wore spats. And it was the weirdest thing. Yeah, I never knew. Well, he was an old English guy. And I mean, they were out of date, but he loved them. And it was the weirdest thing. I always remember, I was like 8 years old. I didn't know what those were. But my father ran for stuff locally, but then he became a behind the scenes person. He's worked on Ella Grasso's campaigns. He worked on Bill O'Neill's campaigns, and Ella got him involved in some of the federal ones. But my mother was elected to State Central, but she also, you know, did a lot of background. So that's, I guess primarily I did, as Pat said, I did run for town council, and I ran for Board of Finance in Trumbull. And I attribute a lot of that encouragement to my former first selectman, Paul Tipinelli, obviously another Italian. And he was the one who always encouraged me because, like, for example, for the Board of Finance, I said to him, Paul, I don't have that kind of background. He says, Nancy, you don't need it. You learn as you go. And I can't tell you how many times I have said that to so many women in general about, you don't have to have the knowledge. And I always found it interesting whenever I asked women, because I was town chair in Trumbull for about 30 years, whenever I asked women to run, you know, it was always, well, let me think about it, and I don't have the background for it. And Pat, Russo, you're shaking your head. You know it too, that. And yet you ask a man and they say, okay. I mean, it's never, once I think it was, a guy said, let me go ask my wife if it's okay. I think he was trying to get out of it. And that's why he used that as an excuse. But fortunately, this year, I think we have one of the largest group of women running for office in Connecticut for state reps and state senate than we have ever had. So, you know, that's good. In Trumbull, Rosa, when I was growing up, 40% of the population were Italian American, and that's because so many of them came from Bridgeport to raise their family. So, but that has now significantly decreased. But so, as far as being state party chair, that was, you know, interesting, and I was encouraged by, ironically, Joe Ganim and Mario Testa, as well as John Olson, to even consider it. And it was me against two men. And so many people, you know, felt it was time for a woman. So it was, you know, interesting and helpful, but it still was. And one of the men I was running against was a former congressman, Jim Maloney. So it wasn't going to be an easy race because people felt, well, he had the experience, and I was on state central and I had local experience, but not, you know, like a congressperson. But in the end, he backed away. So it was a unanimous vote, but it was interesting. And I learned a lot about how, as women, we sell ourselves short. And we need to just be willing to do it and know that so many women are willing to help. So I think I covered everything, Pat.
And you are serving your second stint.
Yes.
Let's not be shy about that.
I just thought that, Nancy, that you kind of come full circle. I didn't know your mom served on State Central.
Yes.
So, you know, this is, you know, these are role models, a generation of women, and they held these various offices. And I always say that given the same kind of opportunities that we had, they'd rule the world. They're tough, you know, so what great role model. That's terrific.
Yeah, and Rosa, now that you said that, I could say that what was fascinating is, and I'll make the story as quick as possible. When Ella Grasso won, Bill O'Neill went to her and said, I'd like to be state party chair. And Ella said, do you have anybody? And she says, no, go ahead and do it. So Bill O'Neill went out and was calling all the state central committee people. And then Peter Kelly decided he wanted to run for it. So he went to Ella Grasso, and Ella Grasso was very close to Peter Kelly. So she called up Bill O'Neill and said, well, you can't run for it. Peter Kelly wants it. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I've already called people, so I'm staying in the race. So now my mother was on State Central. She had committed to Bill O'Neill, and one of the people on Ella's staff had called my father and said, you have to get your wife to change her vote and to support what Rosa wants. So, and my mother said to my father, I am not changing my vote. I committed to Bill O'Neill, and the only thing you have in politics is your word. So I'm not changing. And, you know, I'll always remember that because you see it all the time. And I won't even go down that path with the Republicans in the Senate these days, but they forgot that their word is anything. But it's just something I'll always remember about my mother saying.
Yeah. And for me, you know, my mother said, never take no for an answer, you know, and never give up. So, you know, it's the strength that these women were so important to all of us,
So, you know, your comment about, Nancy, about asking, you know, what part of Italy you're from reminded me of my mother's blind date at 20 with my dad. And she comes home to her parents and says, I met the man tonight I'm going to marry. And they were all excited. And they asked the same question. Oh, is he Napolitan? Where's he from? You know, oh, he's Sicilian. Sicilian? That's not Italian. You can't marry him. So it was a mixed marriage. Fortunately, you know, 62 years of wedded, you know, crazy bliss. It worked out. But you know, again, you have to be Italian to like get that. The other thing I was talking to a group of Italian girlfriends about the other day, we were talking about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, which we've been celebrating all year in and out of COVID. And we were talking about what election day looked like for us growing up. You know, again, when you have nothing to compare it with, right? Because this is your experience, right? This is how you live day to day. Election day was like Sunday mass growing up for me. My mother would get us in the, get dressed. We're going to vote, right? Throw us in the station wagon, all four of us. We'd get there. We got our best shoes on, our dress coat, gloves. It was a big deal. And she's explaining the ballot to us and how she was going to vote. You know, our eyes were glazing over, but there she'd bring all four of us in the voting booth with her. We'd all get to pull a lever. I remember picking up my sisters, 10 years younger than I am, lifting her up. So it was a family affair. And I think it's because, and my mom was president of the League of Women Voters forever when I was growing up. And I really do believe that all four of us have never missed a vote. Primary, I lived in Japan 3 years, it didn't matter. Never missed a vote. So when you have that kind of background, right? I mean, I can just imagine what election day was for you, Rosa, growing up, your mother taking over Worcester Square.
It was before, but I just have to say this one thing. See, you know, when your mother and father and they, you know, together in both Italian. I don't know if you had this experience, but when I brought Stan Greenberg home, it was my Aunt Carmel, true story, my Aunt Carmel Canestri. She said, and she met Stan, etc. And then she says, yeah, he could pass for an Italian. I said, right, but everything was focused in there. But it was the ramping up to election day. Every day, every night, canvassing on the phone, you know, and I watched it. I watched it growing up, or checking the names off the voting sheet to see who was called, who was not, who needed a ride, all of those things. And on election day, well, it was 5 a.m. In the morning. The polls opened at 6, and you know, it was every moment of that day tied up with getting out a vote. And I can hear my mother on the phone, you know, at 7:45, just saying, I don't care if you have your bathrobe on. We will pick you up and we will take you to the polls. You have to vote. And you know what? Today, I just say, I don't care who it is. You just drag them to the polls if they are a voter, because you got every single vote out. But it was very exciting. And Nancy, you know, Patty, that it was very, very exciting. And to see the machines open and what those counts were. Exactly. And, you know, and they get a sense of the effort that you put in and the reward of winning, you know, and what it meant to be in touch with people and to, you know, get people to think that you were, they had enough confidence in you to be able to vote for you. So. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, before the next question is a discussion of identity politics. And the role that identity politics has played in your life, in your lives, your successes, your failures as a result of that. Now, this is a fascinating exploration, because I never realized it was identity politics. It was just who we are, right, as a people. And so it was not. It was a question that I had never really considered until, and I know all of you have been interviewed by Ann Nyberg over the years, and it was several years ago. It was Italian American Leaders Week in Connecticut, and that was one of the questions that she asked me was, you know, about identity politics and what was it about being raised Italian that made me an effective leader, you know? And it was something I had never really considered. And I said, well, I know how to feed people. If you feed them, they will come. I'll never forget working on Richard Blumenthal's campaign. There was no food. First thing I said was, we got to order food. We got to get the pizza in here. And then they'll come. They came in droves and they killed themselves. They worked so hard for Richard. And so, you know, we just intuitively know that, right? So it was an interesting, just kind of a really interesting thought. It was something that had never occurred to me. So when you think about identity politics today, how has that impacted your successes, your challenges? Nancy, why don't we start with you?
Oh, okay. Early on, like I said, Trumbull was 40% Italian, so I do feel that it made a difference. I know people would look at who was on the ballot, and you know, if they weren't involved in politics, they would actually go down and vote for all the Italians first. Mm-hmm. Although I think if I was ever running against an Italian male, most of those older Italians, particularly the males, would have voted for the male over me. But fortunately, that never happened. I don't see it as much now. I think, you know, particularly with millennials, they don't see any of that, at least the ones I have known, that see it more along party lines than they do, whether it, you know, your ethnicity or whatever. So I don't see it as much as I used to before. But of course, Rosa, what did you say? New Haven's 21% Italian, so I'm thinking it probably still happens there.
Yeah, no, it's very, you know, there are really two things, and you brought up one of them, Nancy, and that's, you know, about women running for office and women serving in the House of Representatives. But I can always tell, you know, and I grew up arguing with my dad when he said, look, you had to have a balanced ticket. You needed to have, you know, an Irishman, an Italian, someone who was Jewish, and so forth. I said, you know, whoa, Dad, that's going out with, you know, yeah, you wait and see. And, you know, that the identity politics plays a very, very big role. And I'm going to give you one further thought. When I was running the first time, people thought they were voting for my mother, Louisa DeLauro. And, you know, I said, fine, whatever it is, to get them to the polls, you know, to vote for me. But I knew that I would have support in the Italian American community because they identified with success or potential success and pride, great pride. And again, I think Nancy was right about this, is whether you're running against an Italian male, because that's a different thing with regard to, that's the women's side of the coin. But the pride of, you know, and look, and today I would say when I've cast my vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House, I always stand up and say, I'm proud to cast my vote for the first woman and then the first Italian American woman as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. That pride, and that I think was reinforcing, you know, to all of us in running for office. However, in the Congress itself, you have to understand even today that it's a challenge for women. Women need to work harder. It's not about my ethnicity. It's women, all of us. You need to work much harder than our male counterparts. And I realized that early on. I'll just tell you very, very quickly, I went in to testify before a Defense Appropriations Committee because Stratford is in my district. And at that time, we made the engine for the M1A1 tank. And I went before, I did my testimony, and the chair of the committee, Jerry Lewis from California, he looked at me and he says, Congresswoman, can you talk about this tank without looking at your notes? I said, you're damn straight I can. You know, so it was about women don't deal with defense issues. When I ran, and Nancy Pelosi was on the ballot for whip, and I was running for chair of the, wanted to chair the Democratic caucus at the time, we said, we can't have 2 women in the leadership. It was all right to have, you know, several men, but not, you know, 2 women. But, you know, people are usually true to their ethnic community, you know, that they gives you a leg up. It really does. Because it's connected with pride.
But it also has, I mean, the next question is just so, when I think about the 2 of you and how you've been able to really use, you know, your cultural identity, you know, as a way to serve and as a way to be collaborative leaders. I mean, that's you 2. So, you know, it's, Rosa, you serve so thoughtfully and collaboratively, and you use your Italian background to make sure that everybody you represent has a voice. That's just kind of, right?
Yeah, well,
it's a springboard for you.
It's the atmosphere in which, you know, in which I grew up. And again, both of my parents were involved in politics. So, you know, while I didn't run myself for the, early on, I grew up in an atmosphere in which it was about inclusion, and not only, but being responsive to people, and making sure people's voices were heard, and listening to what was going on. You couldn't sit, you know, on a, you know, whatever it was, you know, there'd be a knock at the door, someone would come in, you could be having dinner, and, you know, my folks would say, come, you know, have dinner. And the person came because they needed to maneuver through the local government and get, you know, so forth. So, you know, and, you know, but you were then listening, because that translated into, that's a specific, that happens today. What are people telling us about what's going on in their lives? How do you translate that to action, at whether it's the local level, it's the state level, with Nancy DiNardo at the party level? What is it that the Democratic Party is doing and offering and talking about that reflects what people, you know, care about? So that's, if you want to be in this business, you are tied to what people's views are, who they are, what they are, and making the connections for them and for yourself with them.
Mm-hmm. Nancy, anything you'd like to add? Kind of behind the scenes?
Well, just, you know, I agree with Rosa, and I think, you know, our background of being, you know, family and people, I think has really helped me, and why people are willing to step up and work with me, because it's not just about being a Democrat. You know, we talk about their families, you know, the kids, and and I never thought about it before, but I do think it's because of our Italian background that we tend to relate to people on a personal level, not just a party level. And I do think that, you know, makes a difference.
And, you know, we're always wanting to make sure that other women are in the room as well, you know, and that's, you know, look, I can remember, you know, and as I say, growing up in our household, a Sunday, big family dinner, etc., everybody, you know, together. And then there would be, you know, the discussion about, you know, politics, etc. And oftentimes I would see, you know, my dad, my uncles, etc. They would, you know, be in a room and they're talking about it. But I would just say, and I think, you know, Nancy, your mom was the same. My mother would walk right in the room and be involved in the conversation. And that for me was, yeah, hey, why am I'm not going to be excluded from this conversation that, you know, hell, I can cook a great meal, but I also have some things to say about where we're going, you know, and what we're doing, you know. So, you know, and that's, you know, that's important. That's part of the inclusion, I think, that we all, you know, or barriers that we had to, you know, to steel ourselves from, to be included in the conversations, you know.
Yeah, and that's so true, Rosa. I mean, when I first started, I can't tell you how many times I was the only woman sitting at the table. And one thing I always notice is we're sitting around the table, and of course there's coffee, and when it's time to leave, I was the only one picking up my cup to put it wherever, and where all the guys just left their cups on the table, I guess waiting for a woman to come and pick it up. So one time I did call them out on it, and look, they didn't do it anymore.
Shall be nameless. There is one political person that I worked for who said, "Can you get up and get so and so this?" I said, "He's got legs, so go." I didn't set well overall. I got in big trouble, but who cares? You know, hey, you know, this is and it's good. I also think we help to bring other women along. And I think that that's critically important. It's not about, you know, there are some people who relish being the only woman at the table, right, but it is not the conversation unless, you know, you've got the various, you know, points of view and several, you know, that are included in the conversation, because exactly, that's when the agenda changes, and certainly in my world, and what issues you focus on.
You know, Rosa, you're just reminding me of that story that you tell about your mom talking to a group of women. Ladies, make your voices heard.
God, yeah. She wrote that in 1933. Come on, girls, let's make our voices heard. And hell, I've described my mother as an equal opportunity antagonist to every mayor of the city of New Haven. No one was left behind in that.
I remember, yeah, that still stays with me. So there was a question, so we can go to questions because we're running out of time, as I knew we would, from Kate Farrar. And I should just say that Kate's one of our rock star grads at the campaign school. She's running for state rep in West Hartford, running a brilliant campaign, if I do say so myself. We're just so proud of her. So in speaking to voters this year, they seem more motivated than ever. What do you both think we can do in our country to expand access to the vote and democracy again? And P.S., next year when we are together live, I think we all need to show up with some purple highlights with Rosa. You inspire us in all ways, darling. So that's a great question.
Go ahead. You're on the firing line here.
Well, I was paying attention to the purple here, and I lost track of what we should be doing.
What more we could be doing? That getting in terms of getting out the vote.
A couple of things. It's, you know, I've been speaking, you know, on radio and different places about it because, quite honestly, I am concerned that you know, the Republican National Committee sent out, and the Republican chair, J.R. Romano, just forwarded out about this Trump army. Would you volunteer to be a member of the Trump army to stand at the polls, you know, to protect against voter fraud, which really was masked to deter any people from coming out and voting. And we've called him out on it. And around the state, as Rosa can say, I mean, there has been some real nasty acts of destruction and violence. And it's promoted by Donald Trump because he doesn't condemn it. And so we see it more and more all over the state. And I'm just really concerned that it escalates as we get closer to the election. But to answer the question directly is, I think talking about it to friends and family is very important. And don't assume everybody's voting. You know, if they can't make it out, certainly encourage them to use the absentee ballots, or they can even go to their local town or city halls and vote right in the town clerk's office. And, you know, but don't make the assumption everybody's voting. And obviously I hope everybody's voting Democratic, but I think it's really important to be talking about it. And there's all different groups. Biden for Connecticut has groups, the state party has groups, your local races, your state Senate and state reps all have phone banking, and we also have text messaging. So, and you'll get the groups like Indivisible who are doing it to Pennsylvania and Florida and other states. And Rosa could speak to some of the seats that we could pick up. So if you feel because Connecticut's so blue, you don't have to work in Connecticut. I mean, there's ways of, like I say, Biden for Connecticut certainly has a phone banking that you could probably direct you to if you want to call in other states to help Democrats win.
Let me just address that, but I want to say two things. State Party Chair Nancy DiNardo is responsible for really making Connecticut blue, of electing a governor, electing 2 senators, and electing 5 members of the congressional delegation of all Democrats. That's happened on her watch. And I want to say about Patty Russo and the campaign school. I talked about, you just mentioned Kate and go Kate, but in the congressional effort, Lauren Underwood from Illinois is a graduate of the campaign school. Nakima Williams, graduate of the campaign school, who's going to be coming to the Congress after this election. Gabby Giffords, who was, so really people who are both Patty and Nancy, making that difference in terms of what our politics looks like. So and I think I've lost track. What we need to do is, I think people are going to come out to vote. I think we're going to see overwhelming number of people on both sides. I think people view this election that there is so much at stake, but people need to make a plan now. They need to think about what Nancy says. Are you going to vote absentee? Then you get your application, you get that in, you get your ballot, and you put it in a drop box. If you're going for election day, you need to be prepared for lines and for social distancing and for all of that. And honestly, no matter how long it takes, you're seeing lines now with states that have early voting in Georgia, Florida, Wisconsin, and I will speak as a Democrat as well. I think we're going into election in a very strong position. I encourage, what we can't do, I believe we need to have a landslide election. And I think that is going to, I think that's going to happen. But above all, people need, don't presume, Nancy said, people need to be encouraged to cast their ballot. And quite frankly, whatever they're going to do, they should come out to vote. People have died for the right to vote. We cannot let people be fearful, no matter who they're going to vote for, of getting out there and casting their vote. And we also have one more thing we need to let people know, that because there may be an overwhelming number of absentee ballots, and I'm just being apolitical in this, no matter what it is, that the stamped time and date that it is in, and if it takes 1 or 2 days longer to count that vote, it's okay. That is not rigged. That is not fraudulent. It is the way we have cast ballots in the past and the way we have voted in the past. But please, everybody think about voting in the November 3rd election.
Excellent, excellent commercial for civic engagement. It's wonderful.
Right.
So when we're talking about the presidential, this great question from Angelica came in. With Kamala Harris on the ticket as vice president, I'm curious if you have reflected on Geraldine Ferraro and her legacy. What did her historic nomination in 1984 mean to each of you then and now?
Well, Rosa, you were closer. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I will. I was at the convention and I went with, Senator Dodd. I've got to tell you that I won't forget. I can even tell you the dress that I wore. It was a green and white dress, and I had posters, and she was in white, and she made her statement. And I will tell you, the tears come to my eyes. What a pioneer. And I wanted to work specifically for her vice presidential campaign. She was obviously running with Walter Mondale. But look, her mother was a garment worker. Her mother had been widowed. I felt such a kinship with who she was. But it was the Mondale people who told me, actually it was John Sasso, I will never forget it. I wanted to go directly to work for her campaign, take a leave of absence from the senator's office and go and do that. They said, no, you're gonna work for the Mondale campaign. And I went to New Jersey for 2.5 months. But in the last gathering we had, the last rally in Hudson County in New Jersey, tens of thousands of people. Geraldine Ferraro spoke, and the campaign staff, all the elected officials were in the front row, campaign staff behind them. And what she did, she finished speaking and she turned around. She said hello to the elected officials and she reached over to shake the hands of all of the campaign staff as she left that stage, something I will never forget. And somebody gave her at another meeting New Jersey tomatoes, okay? New Jersey tomatoes in the bag. And she looked and she says, oh my God, tonight. And she looked at me, she says, Rosa knows what we're gonna do. We're gonna slice the tomato. We're gonna put some garlic and some parsley and some olive oil on it. And she was a remarkable woman and not treated very well as the first woman to serve as a vice presidential candidate. But times have changed. Yes. We're gonna have a woman vice president.
Yes. Nancy, anything you want to add about Geraldine?
No, I just think it was so true. And there were, because she was a woman, I mean, there were Italians that were so proud of it. There were some Italian males who felt, well, we should have had an Italian man, but she was, as Rosa said, phenomenal. And about a month or so after the election, I was in the Bronx picking up ravioli and she was there. And I have to tell you, she stopped and talked to people, even though she was, had been rushing along, people stopped her and she stopped and talked to everybody. Anybody who wanted to talk to her, she stopped and talked to. So I always thought she was great and really respected her. Patty, before we go on, I just, I know Rosa's not going to be, and probably Pat is not going to be happy with this, but I do want to say this. I mean, you all know that Rosa's up for re-election and she is running against a nasty slumlord, one of the top 10 slumlords in New York, and the woman has at least 70 complaints against her about not having heat and not having water in apartments and throwing people out when she shouldn't have been doing that. But that's neither here nor there. When Rosa wins, she will be also fighting for the chairmanship of the Appropriations Committee. Now, you all know how important that, I hope I shouldn't make that assumption, that is one of the most powerful committees in the federal Congress. And I believe it'll be the first time anyone from Connecticut has been able to serve as a chairman of a committee, or at least appropriations, if there was ever been anyone who served before. And obviously, Rosa will be great, and Connecticut will be well served on this as well. But all of this it's important if you would consider supporting Rosa. Friends of Rosa DeLauro is online. If, and any amount that you give will be appreciated. So that's just what I wanted to put in there as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Nancy, that sets me up for our next question beautifully. There are Republican Italian women in Congress. Rosa, do you work well with them?
Let me just go back if I can. I've worked so well with Connie Morella. Connie Morella was no longer in Congress, but we had a very, very close relationship. We did a lot of work on health issues together. Marge Rockema again, you know, worked very, very closely, you know, with her. But actually in Washington, and I would just say this to Pat Tinto, I'm not sure that they still do what we do every year with the Three Wise Women. But Connie and I used to go to all of those events when they held them. She was really spectacular about women's health issues and focused so much of her time and attention. And we could collaborate on those issues, which is great. There's less of that today, unfortunately, you know, Patty, than there was in the past.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm just reminded, thank you, Pat, that Jill Giacoppa Biden would be the first Italian-American First Lady in the White House. I forgot that.
Yes, yes, yeah. I've had the chance to work with, I'm on the committee Italian Americans for, you know, for Joe Biden, and working with the Italian American Democratic Leadership Council, which helps Italian Americans get elected.
Excellent.
Oh, wow.
Yolanda had a question. As Italian American women, do you ever feel conflicted about your political beliefs and your Italian Catholic beliefs?
I could go first on that,
Rosa.
No, because I think, you know, what I am, particularly as a Catholic, not every person who is in the state or, you know, anywhere is Catholic. Everybody has, you know, their own personal religion. So I don't feel that I should be imposing my Catholic views on other people. And it brings it obviously to, you know, pro-life and pro-choice. And I believe in pro-choice and letting a woman have the right to choose, you know, whether she's Catholic or atheist or Protestant or whatever. But it's up to each person to make those choices. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate that it has become, you know, such a big issue. And, you know, I understand the Catholic Church's position on it, but I really think that's not a place for it in politics.
You know, as I said, you know, growing up in an Italian Catholic household has been very, very important to me. And I think that there's a central principle in Catholicism that says that conscience is fundamental, that you follow where your conscience takes you on issues. I think about my Catholicism and politics, and I think about Leo XIII, and I think about the great tradition that Catholicism has in social justice, and just helping to make a difference in people's lives, social and economic justice. And it was Leo XIII, and he wasn't talking about social security as we know it today, but he was talking about how we as a society take care of those in their later years. And when I listened to Pope Francis, when I was at Vatican Square, when he was inaugurated, that's what they call it. And he said what our jobs were as people who served in public life was to care for one another, and to be like St. Joseph, that you regard the people that you take care of as your family. They are your family, and you take care of them. And there are so many issues that are issues about the well-being and life, and it's whether or not people have enough food on their table. It's whether or not they have the access to health care that they need. And so for me, it's the broad spectrum of what Catholicism has taught me as economic justice, social justice, caring for others. And that is a rich tradition that we have. And it plays out in the decisions that you make as an elected official.
Amen. Beautiful. Amen. So we're talking about, and we're out of time, almost out of time. Surprise, we've got about 5 minutes to wrap it up. So let's look at the future quickly, Nancy and Rosa. Women continue to surge. We have more women now, again, than we did in 2018. So that's the good news. Where will women stand in 2021? What can you do to help bridge the gap in services, pay equity? Rosa's the queen of pay equity, and equal representation.
Well, I think since you're right, Rosa's the queen on that. Congresswoman, you take it away.
Oh, God, thank you. Listen, you know, first of all, we are going to see many more women elected to the Congress. We know what 2018 was like, and it's just not about numbers. It is about how the agenda changes, and the issues that we focus on as a country have the benefit of the intellectual capability, the compassion, all of the attributes that women bring to their professional careers, and they bring those, to the Congress, and their voices are represented. But when you think about where we need to go, and today there are over 100 women. You know, there are 6 women who hold the chairmanships of full committees in the House of Representatives. 39 women are subcommittee chairs. So the agenda changes. What is that agenda? It is equal pay for equal work for women. It is about women's health. It's about domestic violence. It's about paid leave. It's about childcare. It's about economic empowerment. It is about the role we play and what we say with regard to our foreign policy and our national security. And women, there were issues here that in the past were never viewed as important and not part of our public discourse, but today they are at the center of what we are talking about. And that's where we're going to, this country will move in these directions and provide economic security and health security and social justice for men and women and for children in this country. And women will have a strong voice, the strongest voice we've had in a very long time. And that will make the difference in what our public policy agenda will be for the benefit of everyone in this country.
I think that is a very nice closing statement.
Thank you. It's a wrap. Pat, give it back to you. All right, Pat, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry. Anyway, that was a perfect lead into where we want, to end this. And I want to thank you all for taking your time during this unbelievable, hectic, period for all of us with 2 weeks to Election Day to go. No matter what party you are, there's only, 14 days left to get your message out. But the message of that, we're all in this together, and we have to give women the strong voice that they need. That's why it's important for us to share these conversations, but also to be part of organizations like NOIAW, who find another platform for women, it may be just, only Italian Americans, but we do support one another no matter who we are and where we are, and that's the important message here. But I also, 2 things to wrap it up. When Rosa mentioned the events in Washington, D.C., every year we have an Epiphany celebration in our 4 regions, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., and the greater New York area, where we honor 3 wise women instead of 3 wise men, or no wise guys allowed. And the 3 panelists here have been our former wise women honorees in Connecticut. But Diana, because this was originally intended, that was our main fundraiser, was the Epiphanies. She came up with this other idea of having 4 for $40 series, and we're the 3rd of 4 events that we had this week, had this month in Italian American Heritage. There's 1 more left, so just I'm putting a plug if anybody wants to join us. For the fourth one coming up, it's going to be Rhode Island and Artistic Inspiration and Creation. You can go to NOIAW, N-O-I-A-W, and .org and sign up for the next one. And then if you wanted to get part of all four, we'll send you the recordings from the previous four. But it's just been, you know, great, and that's also to help us keep interest in our organization. If you if you enjoy these kind of programs, and I'm talking to attendees who came out and took time out of their workday, hopefully their day at home today, to join us, please go to our website again and maybe find other ways that you can become more involved. You know, we're Italian American, but we like to have everybody who's an Italophile or people Italian wannabes, but there's many people who support our issues, and we can work together for the advancement of all women. So thanks again, everybody, for coming in today. And thank you so much.
You.
Congresswoman.
Take
care, guys. Stay safe.
Tanti baci.
Yeah.
Ciao, grazie mille. Ciao.
Grazie mille.
A presto.